Hey guys, welcome back to Steel City Sports. It's been a long time since I've uploaded here on the channel. Not really been a whole lot to talk about. It's been, a little over a month. And if you guys watched that last video I put out, I was saying, yeah, I can't wait till we can talk about what the Steelers are going to do with the quarterback situation. I was like, I'm going to make a video as soon as we find out. Are we getting Aaron? Are we getting Russ? We're a month later. We still don't have one. So that's a conversation for another day. But today we're going to be talking about the 2025 NFL Draft, which is tomorrow. So already here. It's kind of crazy. I remember right after the season ended, it felt like the draft was so far away, and now we are here. So I want to say this up front. I don't claim to be some sort of draft expert or anything like that. This is purely just kind of a conversation to be had about each of these teams. And I want to focus more so on these teams' biggest needs more so than which individual prospect. I'm going to pick a player for each team. And, there's two different ways to really do a mock draft. You can do either one, what you think is going to happen, or two, you can do what you would do if you were the GM. So I guess this is kind of going to be a blend of that. I'm going to go through here, like I said, not a draft expert, not a college football expert, but I do want to talk about each of these teams, some of the things that they need to be looking for in the draft. And definitely stay tuned for tomorrow because I'm going to be putting out a reaction video to who the Steelers take in the first round because there's been a lot of buzz about us maybe getting Shedeur Sanders. So I'm really excited for tomorrow. But let's get into this. I'm going to try to make this quick. But if you're a long-time listener to this channel, every time I say that, it goes on for 30 minutes or more. So let's start the video with the first overall pick being held by the Tennessee Titans. And we all know that this is inevitable. I know there's some people out there saying that this pick could potentially be Travis Hunter or maybe even an Abdul Carter. But I think it's an absolute no-brainer that Cam Ward is going to be the pick here. The Tennessee Titans desperately need a quarterback. You look at Will Levis being a total abject failure at the NFL level. Will Levis has every physical tool you could want, but in between the ears, Will Levis is a total moron and single-handedly costed the Titans a bunch of games this past year. So you need an immediate upgrade at quarterback. And this is some of the stuff, if you listen to me last offseason, some of the reasons why I was flirting with maybe taking the Titans as a playoff team. I didn't do it, thankfully, because they were a mess because their quarterback sucked. But if you go back and listen to me talk about the Titans back then, I was listing off things like they have a good offensive apparatus to put around a quarterback. They check boxes that when I look at a team who's going to be trying to develop a young quarterback, they do check a lot of boxes. Number one, they have an offensive-minded head coach in Brian Callahan who worked directly with Joe Burrow in developing their pass game. So he's got some good experience there. They went to a Super Bowl with him as the play caller. They invested in their offensive line in last year's draft pretty heavily, using the 6th overall pick on an O-lineman to bolster that line and adding J.C. Latham, who is a good player and is only going to get better as time goes on. And I also, this one doesn't apply quite as much because they did lose D-Hop, but I did like some of their collection of weapons, having D-Hop and Ridley at the time. Obviously now D-Hop is gone, but it's not like there's scrubs here. I still think Calvin Ridley's one of the most underrated players in the league. You have two capable running backs here. It's nothing special, but there has certainly been far worse setups for a quarterback to go to than the Tennessee Titans right now. And I think Cam Ward is going to be put in a position for success with this team. So I do have Cam Ward going here. If you want to argue Travis Hunter or argue Abdul Carter, I can kind of see it, but at the same time, if you're going to make that argument, you're kind of acknowledging the fact that they're going to run it back with Will Levis another year, which I think is not a possibility. It's not realistic. So I have the Titans drafting Cam Ward, number 1 overall. Feels totally inevitable. Now moving on to the 2nd overall pick, we have the Cleveland Browns. So for me, this is really where the intrigue starts because the Browns could go in so many different ways here. I think out of all the teams really in the top 5, the Browns are the one kind of linked to trading down the most, that I see at least, because you can make arguments for really any of these top guys, and you could say if a team wants to jump up for a QB and the Browns don't like Shedeur, I don't know. I mean, this one is really, I think, the toughest one to predict of the entire draft because there's so many realistic choices. Now, if I was going to be the Browns GM here, if I were the Browns GM, I would draft Shedeur Sanders. And I get it. It might be viewed as an overdraft. I get it. Shedeur Sanders, pro comp to me, is a better version of Jimmy Garoppolo. So taking a better version of Jimmy Garoppolo as the second overall pick whenever you have the talent like Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter might be frowned upon. However, you need a quarterback. At the end of the day, that's the most important thing in the NFL. So if I were the GM, I'm taking Shedeur. I'm taking him. But I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think they're going to go with one of two players, Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter. I'm just going to go Travis Hunter here. I think he's the best player available on the board. Abdul Carter and Myles Garrett together would be a sensational duo, but I just think that Travis Hunter is such a generational talent. He's a once-in-a-lifetime level athlete and can play two really important positions, receiver and corner. So I get it. He's been harping a lot about how he wants to play both sides at a pro level. I think whoever drafts him is going to allow him to at least try to do that. They're gonna make him pick the primary one, but I think they're also going to let him play some snaps on the other side of the ball. My prediction for Travis Hunter, he's going to play wide receiver mostly, because when you look at value, receivers get paid so much more than corners do. So it's just kind of a economics thing if you're Travis Hunter. But I do think even if he does play receiver primarily, he will get times throughout the game where he is out there at corner. I just don't think he's going to be playing every fucking snap like he seems to think he's going to. That's not going to happen. I would bet a lot of money that will not happen. Let's move on, though, to the New York Giants. So, again, similar to what I said about the Browns, you can make arguments for a lot of players here. Another team that desperately needs a quarterback. I think Shedeur kind of makes more sense here for the Giants than it does for the Browns, because when you look at the Giants coach Daboll, he's on a much hotter seat, so I think he's going to be in a much more he's going to be much more likely to reach on someone like a Shedeur Sanders, because he knows if they have a shitty season again, he's fucking toast. And that goes for the GM as well. So I think the Giants would be more inclined to reach on a Shedeur Sanders than the Browns. So I have them drafting Shedeur Sanders third overall. As a Steelers fan, I kind of want Shedeur, because I would take Shedeur Sanders over Mason Rudolph in 2025. Even with all the baggage that comes to the table with Shedeur and his dad. That being said, I would, as a Steelers fan, like the upside in Shedeur, and for the Giants, they need the position. You can't roll into next year with Russ. I mean, they have Russ and Jameis, so I think you could actually make the argument that they're not going to take Shedeur because they signed two vets. So that's really a compelling argument to be made of. They'd pass on him because they have Russ and Jameis. It'd be one thing if you had just one of those guys, but you have both. So if you want to make that argument in the comments, I think that's a 100% reasonable argument. But for me, like I said, given the GM and the coach, they're going to be more inclined to reach at the quarterback position. This is going to get a lot of attention. Shedeur in a big market would be cool to see. So next, we're going to go on to the New England Patriots. This is a no-brainer. If Abdul Carter's on the board, the Patriots are taking Abdul Carter 100%. You could argue is the best player in this class. Has basically a limitless upside. So, and the Patriots desperately need production on that D-line. They were one of the worst in terms of that last year. And you have Vrabel establishing his culture. You could have a legit 10-time Pro Bowler you get right here to build up your defense around. So, like I said at the beginning of the video, Abdul Carter could go at 1. He's that good. He's good enough to go to any of these top teams in the draft. So the Patriots getting him at 4, I feel like would honestly be their dream scenario if they don't have to move up and still are able to land arguably the next Lawrence Taylor, the next Micah Parsons. So next up at number 5, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars, a team that has a lot of holes. So this is another difficult one for me, similar to the Browns, because the Jags have so many issues with this football team. They're bringing in a new coach, a new GM, kind of a new regime here. So I could hear arguments for several players because this team has so many holes. You could go O-line, D-line, receiver. I've even now started to see Ashton Jeanty linked to the Jags at 5. So I don't know. I really don't know. So that's why I'm not going to really do so much my prediction. I'm going to do more so what I would do in this situation. I'd be looking at receiver pretty heavily with Tetairoa McMillan, who I don't think he's going to be as good as Julio Jones, but he has the frame and play style of a Julio Jones. And you look at the Jags, they don't really have much depth outside of Brian Thomas. We know Brian Thomas Jr. was a home run hit, and maybe you could argue that's a reason to not take receiver, is because they have bigger needs. And Brian Thomas Jr. is already like a stud, had over 1,000 yards as a rookie receiver. So, I could definitely listen to that. Another interesting one for me is Mason Graham, who I think is going to go really high in this draft. So, for me, it would come down to those two guys, Tetairoa McMillan or Mason Graham on the defensive line. I guess I'm going to go Graham. I kind of talked myself out of McMillan because of Brian Thomas Jr. being so good. But, this hasn't stopped teams from having two top receivers. Look at what Cincinnati's done with those guys and what the Vikings have done with Addison and Jefferson. So it wouldn't be that crazy for in 2025 for a team to go heavy on offense like this and really prioritize their pass game, especially when they're paying their quarterback so much money. So I wouldn't be shocked at McMillan, but I think that the fact they have BTJ, they're probably going to go with another position. So I'll take Mason Graham from Michigan. Next up, we have the Las Vegas Raiders. So they have to go, in my opinion, they have to go with an offensive skills position player. You can argue as to who is that going to be, because the Raiders have been a very commonly mentioned team when it comes to Ashton Jeanty. The Raiders and the Cowboys are the two most popular landing spots for Ashton Jeanty. It's tough, because for me, if I'm in the Raiders GM shoes, I'm taking either Jeanty or McMillan, because when you look at their pass game, they really only have, Brock Bowers as a tight end, and Jacoby Myers I like, but he's not a number one receiver in the NFL. He's, a good number 2, great number 3, but he's not a number 1. So, and now, especially since you brought in a guy like Geno Smith, is going to need people to throw the ball to. It's tough. Devontae Adams isn't here anymore. So, while I would like to give them GT, I just think that they're going to prioritize the pass game more with bringing Geno Smith in, with giving him that money, trying to build that offense up. I wouldn't be shocked if this was GT, but I'm going to go with Tetairoa McMillan, 6th overall to the Las Vegas Raiders. Next up, we have the New York Jets. Dumpster fire of a team. I did a mock draft a while ago, probably right after the Super Bowl, where I did just the top 10 picks, and I said the Jets could really do anything because they're such a fucking circus show. And the same thing applies. We're a couple months later here making this video, and I still have absolutely zero fucking clue what the New York Jets are going to do with this pick, because what is this team right now? After the disaster that was last year, bringing in a new defensive coach, that is kind of a indicator to me that they're probably going to go defense. So I don't know, though, because on paper, they have good defensive personnel. That's the tough part about this team. That's why they were so frustrating last year. On paper, they had a bunch of sweet players, but they just couldn't win games. So I don't know. I'd probably go O-line. I think there's a strong chance they're going to go with a defensive player because Aaron Glenn's their new coach. He's going to want to build up his defense there. But I think O-line does make a lot of sense here. I know a lot of people have been bashing on Will Campbell for his short arms. I don't buy into any of that bullshit. I think the immeasurables, or the measurables or whatever, the combine, I don't really take anything away from that. You look at Will Campbell's tape, it's not like he was playing at fucking South Oklahoma State. He was playing at fucking LSU against NFL-level D linemen every fucking game. So this bullshit about small arms or whatever, or small hands, I can't remember which one it is, but I don't really give a fuck. I think this guy's going to be a really good player. The Jets O-line was bad last year. I had actual people in my comments last year trying to tell me that the Jets had a good offensive line last year clearly that person wasn't watching the tape because their line was fucking atrocious. And what they tried to do last offseason was patch it up with Band-Aids and bubble gum, bringing in two of the most injury-prone guys in the league with Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses, two old injured guys. They thought, wow, that's going to fix our O-line. That sounds like a fucking winning recipe right there. And guess what? It was a shit show. It imploded. So you took Fashanu last year. I think they're going to go with the other side with Will Campbell here. He's the pick. He makes the most sense to me. But like I said, I think the Jets at 6 are really one of the most difficult teams to predict because there's just so many areas of concern with that football team. So next up, we have the Carolina Panthers at 8. Throughout this whole process in my initial mock draft and throughout the past couple of weeks, I've liked a receiver for them, and my main reasoning behind that is this is like the prove-it year for Bryce Young. If Bryce Young is going to succeed as an NFL player, this is the year. So if I'm running this team, I want to give Bryce Young as much firepower as possible to put him in a scenario to succeed. So that's a long-winded way of me saying I have them drafting Luther Burden III, who I think honestly could have the upside to be the best receiver in this class. Had a absolutely dominating 2023 at Mizzou, and then 2024 production dropped off, not to his fault. It dropped off because the quarterback play was awful. So I am a massive Luther Burden fan. I think he has every tool. To me, I think he is going to be a version of a Jamar Chase. That's how highly I think of Luther Burden. It's just the reason why I went with McMillan as the first receiver off the board is because his draft stock is simply viewed higher. But me personally, I like Luther Burden more. I think Luther Burden has the higher upside. And so adding that to the Panthers offense to give Bryce Young a sure, no doubt receiver prospect to go into his most important year of his career. Because if Bryce Young fails this year, he's fucking done. He's absolutely done. He was about this close to being out of the league this past year when he was benched. Then Andy Dalton got into a fucking car accident, and they had to throw Bryce Young back out there. And he miraculously was better. He was actually like a good, serviceable NFL player. They almost beat the Chiefs. They only lost to the Chiefs by 1 point. So there's something there with Bryce Young. I'm doubling down on that. I'm giving him as much ammo as I can give him. That's possible. So I am going to draft Luther Burden III, who I think is going to be an absolute fucking monster in the NFL. I think he's going to be a complete menace to opposing teams. Next up, we have the New Orleans Saints. This team is a mess. This team, if I could, I'm not doing trades in this one. I'd honestly try to get the Saints to trade down because they need a quarterback. But you're not drafting one of the quarterbacks here at 9. You're not taking Jackson Dart or Jalen Milroe. You're not going to take those guys at number 9. That's just way too high. Now, you could argue a team will reach on this, and this is something I talked about a while ago, is there's usually at least one or two quarterbacks every year that go way higher than what people were thinking. And a perfect example of that was last year's draft where Michael Penix Jr. and Bo Nix both went in the top 12 picks when they were both graded by the quote-unquote experts as second-round picks. But out of nowhere, these big jumps happened. I believe Penix was the 8th or 9th pick. Bo Nix was the 12th pick. And everyone shit, especially on the Bo Nix pick. Everyone shit on the Broncos, myself included. I'm not going to deny that. I thought it was a crazy pick for 12th overall. But it turned out to work out for Denver. We still have to see for the Falcons, but so I really think there is a chance that a team like the Saints could reach here. I'm not going to do it in this mock draft, but if it does happen, remember this point in this video when I told you there was a possibility it could happen because Derek Carr is a fucking disaster. You could argue to me going into 2025, obviously I'd have to write out the list, but you could argue to me going into next year, Derek Carr is the worst starter in the NFL going into this next season. That's how bad it is. So, quarterback would make sense to me. I don't think they're going to have the balls to do it. So really, it leaves it wide open because the Saints, this is another team that kind of needs help everywhere. Their secondary's not impressive, so I could see maybe like a Malachi Starks potentially. I think he's going to be a really, really good player, but could potentially fall since he plays safety, which, safety is not a very valuable position in today's NFL. I'm going to go with Walter Nolan from Ole Miss on the D-line. Their D-line is getting old, particularly the heart and soul of that D-line. Cam Jordan is, 37 years old, 38 years old now. So I'm going to go with Walter Nolan from Ole Miss to kind of bolster, try to rebuild that O-line. But watch out for them to trade back and draft maybe Jackson Dart or Jalen Milroe. I could see it happening. Next up, we have the Bears. They're taking whoever is the top-rated O-line on their board left, they're taking. I'm going to take the Mizzou O-lineman here, Armand Membu. I don't know if I completely butchered his name or not. Last mock draft, I gave them Will Campbell, but in this scenario, I have him already off the board. So, it just makes too much sense to me. The Bears, they've already invested a lot in their O-line, but it was clear that their O-line, outside of their coaching, because their coaching was their biggest flaw last year, but from a player perspective, the worst part of the Chicago Bears was their offensive line. So I know that they've already brought in assets, but I would just continue to bolster that up and try to put Caleb in the best situation possible. Next up, we have the San Francisco 49ers, who are in a very similar position to the Bears. Their worst flaw on this team is their O-line is bad. So I've liked Kelvin Banks Jr. to them for a while. It appears now that his draft stock is kind of dropping. So maybe they would be a team to watch to trade back and maybe get him later in the draft, because maybe drafting him at this spot at 11 would be viewed as a reach on that guy. But I'm still just going to do it in this draft because I've liked that mock for a long time, because I have them basically taking whoever the best O-lineman available is, because that's by far and away their biggest problem is their O-line is outside of Trent Williams is not very good. I mean, Puny's all right, but outside of those two, the O-line's a mess. So I'm going with Kelvin Banks Jr. Even though he's viewed as going later in this, I still think he has the upside. Arguably the best team, plus best player on that Texas team. So I'm taking him. Next, we have the Dallas Cowboys. I hate to be cliche, but if Jeanty's here, he's going to be a Dallas Cowboy. And as I have it right now, Jeanty is still on the board. I really don't want him to be a Dallas Cowboy, but if he's available here at 12, the Cowboys are going to draft Ashton Jeanty, so that's who I have them taking. They had arguably the worst running back core going into last year. That was one of my big reasons why I made that video before the season started. It was 5 reasons why the Cowboys are going to miss the playoffs. One of my reasons on there was their running back core sucks, and Dak throughout his career is usually heavily reliant on his running backs. He really doesn't have a lot of success if the run game isn't getting going, and that's why they didn't fucking win games when Dak was playing, because the run game was fucking atrocious. You had 78-year-old Ezekiel Elliott, and you had Rico Dowdle, who is 2 feet tall. So no wonder that wasn't going to fucking work. And you combine that with a terrible offensive line. Yeah, it's not really a surprise their offense was a fucking disaster and why their coach got fired. So I have them taking Ashton Jeanty. He's going to give a spark to this offense that is desperately needed. Outside of CeeDee Lamb, there's really no big difference maker. I mean, Ferguson's fine. Brandon Cooks in certain spots when he plays, but he's hurt a lot. So this offense desperately needs a spark, and I have that being Ashton Jeanty here. I think he is going to be a sensational player wherever he goes. So next up, we have the Miami Dolphins. This is another team that I think could go in a number of different directions. But for the simple fact that I think Jalen Ramsey is going to be on a new team, I'm going to go with corner in this spot, and you can argue which corner is going to be the first off the board. You could go with Barron from Texas, but I still think Will Johnson from Michigan is the best corner. I think it's an absolute steal to land Will Johnson at 13. I know he had the injuries, but when he's healthy, I think he has the upside to be an absolute fucking monster, all-pro level corner. And with the Dolphins going to be losing Jalen Ramsey more than likely, even if they keep Jalen Ramsey past this offseason, I don't think he's going to be there much longer. So I'm going with Will Johnson to the Miami Dolphins. Next up, we have the Indianapolis Colts. They're in a sticky situation due to the fact that they don't know if their quarterback can play quarterback. So it's kind of similar to what I told you guys about the Panthers and Bryce Young, about how this is kind of the prove-it year for Bryce Young, so you want to put as much around him. That exact logic, I think, applies to the Indianapolis Colts. Yeah, there's a lot of holes on this team, but your most important problem, I guess you'd call it, your most important thing going into 2025 is, can Anthony Richardson play the quarterback at an NFL level? Because right now it looks like he can't. So what can we do as an organization to maximize the potential that he actually can play? And the answer to that question is giving him more weapons. So the top receivers are off the board. You look at tight end. I think Tyler Warren is the pick here. I think he's better than Colston Loveland by a lot, actually. Not a lot, I guess, but I think there is a sizable gap between Warren and Loveland. I would go with Tyler Warren here. Was basically Penn State's offense this past year. Drew Aller to Tyler Warren, one of the best connections this past year in college football. I think he's going to be an absolute monster in the NFL. He's going to be a problem for years. And like I said, you want to put as much around AR as you can. So that's the pick for me. Next up, we have the Atlanta Falcons. I still think defensive line is their biggest issue. And they tried to patch that last year with Matthew Judon, who I don't even know if he's on the team. You know, I feel like I remember them cutting him, but I could be misremembering that. Even if Judon is still on the team, which I probably should know, but even if Judon is still on the Falcons, he's older, he's out of his prime. To me, that's still their biggest issue, because they got good stuff outside of that. I mean, their O-line's good. They have a young quarterback they're building around. They've got skill position guys for Penix to work with, like a Bijan and a Drake London and Kyle Pitts. You've got good secondary personnel. So for me, the biggest hole on this team still remains D-line. So that's where they'd be looking to go. So there's this Mike Green guy from Marshall. I don't know a fucking thing about Mike Green at all. I didn't hear his name until like probably 2 or 3 weeks ago when he started fucking exploding up draft boards. The only reason I'm picking him here is because I like the positional fit. You know, Pro Football Focus has him rated as the 10th best prospect in this class. He's an edge. It's a position of need for Atlanta. So remember when I said at the beginning of the video, I'm not a fucking draft expert. I don't know who this Mike Green guy is, but Pro Football Focus seems to like him, and the Falcons need an edge. So I'm going with Mike Green from Marshall to be the pick here to hopefully bolster Atlanta's pass rush, which was basically not existent last year. Next up, we have the Arizona Cardinals. This is another team that I think has a lot of issues. I would go defense. You could go offense, but I don't think offense is really their big problem. They just really don't have a lot of good players on defense. You know, Budda Baker's getting up there. They've had some misses in the draft. I think you could realistically argue Jihad Campbell at linebacker. The only reason, though, why I don't think they'll take him is because he plays linebacker, and linebacker more and more is becoming kind of an outdated position. And I think the same logic kind of holds up with Malachi Starks as well, is because I really like Malachi Starks. I think he is one of the best players in this class, but because of positional value, I do think he's going to slide. So I don't know. For me, this is a similar thing with the Falcons, is that I would go pass rush. Again, I'm not a draft expert, so I don't know exactly who the perfect defensive lineman would be for this team. If you have more insight, you could let me know down in the comments. I really like James Pierce Jr. He's one of my favorites in here, but I don't think he's going to go quite this high. I guess Kenneth Grant is appealing. I really do want to give them Jihad Campbell, but I don't think a linebacker is going to go this high. So I'm going to go with the D-line. I'm going to go with Kenneth Grant. Don't love that pick because I don't know a whole lot about Kenneth Grant, but again, it's positional need. Next up, we have the Cincinnati Bengals. Every single pick the Bengals have in this draft should be used on defense. Every single one they own. I'm just going with their best available player here, Malachi Starks. Getting a player of that level at 17, you know, their defense has not been the same since they lost Jesse Bates. That was a massive mistake. So you could replace that finally now with Malachi Starks, who, like I said, I think is arguably, and just from a talent perspective, I think Malachi Starks is arguably a top 5 talent in this class. So the Bengals getting him all the way down here at 17, I think is an absolute fucking steal for the Bengals. And like I said, every other pick in this draft better be used on defense because they desperately need it. It's terrible. Next up, the Seahawks. I would be looking at receiver now because they just basically offloaded all their receivers. They got JSN. That's kind of it. So I would be looking to add receiver in this draft. I'd go get JSN's former teammate from Ohio State, Emeka Egbuka. I think it's the pick because Lockett and DK are now both gone. The depth at receiver is basically shot outside of JSN. So I have them drafting Emeka Egbuka here at 18. So next up, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's a strange team because they're always consistently good. They don't really have one major fatal flaw in this team. It's a pretty good, well-rounded team. I have them going with Jahdae Barron. I don't know if I pronounced his first name right, but they're kind of weak at corner. They're kind of they don't really have great depth at the corner position, and Barron, I do view him as a high-end prospect out of Texas. I don't think he's as good as Will Johnson, obviously, like I said earlier, but still has extremely high upside, and the Bucs can afford to take a guy like that here. They don't need him to come in to be like a day one contributor, but he certainly has that upside. So I have Tampa drafting him here. Next up, we have the Denver Broncos. I think could actually go in a number of different directions here. I do think it's going to be offense, though, because their defense was really, really good last year. And I just think that they're going to want to put more firepower around Bo Nix. So I could see a couple players here. Colston Loveland makes a lot of sense. I think Omarion Hampton makes a lot of sense. So I think it really is going to come down to one of those two guys. If they're both on the board, you have to ask yourself, though, what are they going to value more, tight end or running back? Historically, I think in Sean Payton's case, it probably would be tight end. He's more passing oriented. I know he had Ingram and Reggie Bush and all them, but you look at the success that they had with Jimmy Graham in New Orleans. I do think that tight end makes a lot of sense here in Colston Loveland. So I'm going to draft him here. I would have liked to got them another receiver, but there's not really quite a receiver of that caliber available. So I'm going to give them him. Next up is my team, the Pittsburgh Steelers. So this is assuming we don't trade up at 21. Who would I like to see us draft? Given the players that are still left on the board, I would not want them to take Milroe or Dart here. I do think Dart could go in the first. I don't think Milroe's going in the first. I think Milroe will go in the second or third round, probably the second. So I do think you could potentially get one of them in the second round. And when I look at the Steelers team, it's tough, man, because I think there's a really realistic scenario where we actually do trade up to get Shedeur Sanders. But also the Steelers are kind of hesitant on doing big, bold moves like that. And you're sitting here at 21. We need a quarterback. We need one. Like, we can't roll into next year with Mason Rudolph as the starter. As much as I like Mason, he did good things for us at the end of the 2023 season. You can't roll into next year paying a guy like DK Metcalf $33 million and have your quarterback be a guy making $4 million in Mason Rudolph. Like, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I think running back can make a lot of sense here. We just let Najee walk. I don't love Jaylen Warren as a lead number one back. He's good in a committee when he was in a committee with Naj, but to have him as the clear number one lead back, I don't love that. So I could really be talked into Omarion Hampton, I think I'd be very happy with that selection. But I think I talked myself into Jackson Dart. I don't love it, but we need a quarterback. It's that simple. And like I said earlier, teams are going to reach on quarterbacks. The Steelers don't have one. I don't know what the fuck's going on with Aaron, so I have them reaching here. Would I like it to happen? I don't know, but we need the position. Dart's going to get overdrafted just because he plays quarterback. Like I said, I don't love it, but that's what I have them doing. Next up, we have the Chargers. So the Chargers, I think, are probably going to go like a D lineman or a linebacker. I could see Jahad Campbell actually fitting in really well here, potentially like a James Pierce Jr., Jalen Walker. I've liked to give them Colston Loveland in prior mock drafts because obviously the Michigan connection with Harbaugh, and he likes that style of player, but he's obviously off the board in this scenario. I'm going to go with Jahad Campbell. That, to me, that feels like a Jim Harbaugh type pick. Like we said earlier, linebacker for most of the league kind of feels like an outdated position, but that's not how Harbaugh views the game of football. He's much more in that old school vein. They're going to be looking to add to that, and I think they need more weapons, but the guys that I want to get to the Chargers are just not on the board in this scenario. So yeah, I do have them drafting Jahad Campbell from Bama. Next up is the Green Bay Packers. Team that could go in a number of different spots. They're a pretty well-rounded team. I don't think there's one big glaring hole on this team. You could maybe argue corner for them because they've been rumored to be shopping Jaire Alexander. Receiver, they've got a bunch of young receivers, but none of them has really stamped themselves as the clear standout best guy. You could go with maybe their pass rush. I'm not sure for this one. This one for me is tough. I really like James Pierce Jr. For me, going into this year, he was viewed as one of my top guys, and he did slide a lot. He's still going to be a first-rounder, I think. I'm going to go with him here. I think James Pierce Jr. does have generational level upside, but it's a question is he going to be able to reach it? There's been some questions about his character and that stuff, but I'm really enamored by the player that we saw, especially his film from 2023 is just he just jumps off the fucking screen. So the Packers, I have them taking a swing here on James Pierce Jr. Next up, we have the Minnesota Vikings. Pretty solid team. I think they're probably going to be looking into secondary because they lost some guy. They lost Murray. Is it Murray or Murphy? Can't remember. Their secondary is just not very impressive to me whatsoever. So I'm going to go with the top secondary guy still on the board, which is Trey Amos from Ole Miss. It just makes a lot of sense. I mean, they don't need to add to their offense. I mean, Kevin O'Connell has shown he's an absolute offensive guru. They've got all the firepower you could want on that offense. The line is good, so I'm going with him there. Next up, we have the Houston Texans. O-line. They just offloaded Laramie Tunsil, whoever they view as their top O-line prospect, which in this case I think is Josh Simmons from Ohio State, so he's going to be a Houston Texan. Next up is the Los Angeles Rams, a team that could go in a number of directions. Would probably like to go O-line, maybe, but I don't really see quite an O-lineman in this level that makes sense. I mean, the Rams are just a really, really well-rounded team, and they honestly, this is kind of a hot take, but the Rams honestly could be a team to watch for taking a quarterback here. If they like Jackson Dart or Jalen Milroe at this spot, because to me, the Rams don't really have a big glaring hole on their team. They fixed their line. As long as Stafford's there, you got elite quarterback play. You've got Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua at receiver. You got Kyron Williams. He's a touchdown machine at running back. The defense played really well last year, particularly that D-line. So there's not really a position on this team that jumps out to me as a glaring hole. So maybe they could be like, hey, we know Stafford isn't going to be here forever. If they really do like a Jackson Dart or Milroe in this spot, watch out for that. I'm just going to give them a good player, though, in Jalen Walker at linebacker. They're not deep at linebacker, and Jalen Walker, to me, he has the potential to be a really good player. I mean, he's coming from Georgia. You just say it out loud. A linebacker from Georgia. Yeah, I think that guy is going to be a fucking 10-year star in the NFL. So, but like I said, watch out for quarterback. Next up, I'm going to try to, get through this quickly, these last couple picks. Baltimore Ravens at 27. I would probably look towards D-line because it wasn't anywhere near as dominant as it was the year prior. Madubuike, not saying he fell off, he still had a good year, but he wasn't as dominant. You obviously lost Jadeveon Clowney. So I would definitely be looking at D-line here. I like Nick Scorton from Texas A&M. I think he is one of the more underrated players here. Same thing about his teammate Shamar Stewart. But I personally like Scorton more, so I'm going to give the Ravens Nick Scorton. I think he's going to be really good. I don't get why he's falling so much in this draft. I really do think highly of Nick Scorton. I think he's going to be a special player in the NFL. Shamar Stewart, I have going right after him. So I have Texas A&M boys going back-to-back to Detroit here. If they're able to hit on him to pair with Aiden Hutchinson, watch the fuck out. Because we know when healthy, Hutchinson's one of the best in the league. If they hit on this guy as well to pair on that defensive line, this team is going to be an absolute fucking problem. Next up, the Commanders. I mean, they've had a very busy offseason. They've brought in, Deebo Samuel. They brought in Laramie Tunzel. I think they are probably going to be looking more on the defensive side of the ball. So I don't know anything about this edge from Boston College, Donovan. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name, but it's a position of need. Pro Football Focus has him graded as the 17th best prospect in this class. It makes sense to me. Next up, the Buffalo Bills. One of the best teams in the National Football League, so it's kind of hard to, you're really getting into nitpick territory. I'm going to look more towards their secondary, which was really depleted. It's not bad, but they offloaded a ton of guys last offseason, so I have them adding to that with Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame, who I think is really a steal at this spot. I think Benjamin Morrison's going to be a really good NFL player for a long time, so to get him at this spot in the draft, can't pass on it. Now we're at the Kansas City Chiefs. They're probably going to go with O-line. That would be my guess because you just offloaded Joe Thuney. Their O-line did not play particularly well, especially in that Super Bowl. I mean, but who's going to play well against that Eagles D-line? So, I don't know. I think also another one to consider is running back, but I don't think they're going to take running back in the first round because Andy Reid just has such a good track record of, plugging guys in and out. So, I don't think they're going to quite use their first-round pick. Omarion Hampton does jump out to me, but I do think they're probably going to go more towards O-line. So I have them going with Josh Connerly Jr. from Oregon. Just makes a lot of sense to go O-line. Next, you have the Eagles, the most stacked team in the NFL right now, and they have the hardware to prove it. So really, they could go with anything. They could really go at any spot here. I obviously don't have them going running back. They're probably not going to go D-line. They're fucking stacked there. They're stacked in the secondary. I don't know where they go. You could maybe make a case for receiver because I've heard rumblings of them maybe trading A.J. Brown. I don't think they're going to do that, but that's a potential scenario. I really, really don't know. I don't know. I guess I kind of am leaning safety because when I'm thinking about their roster, their safeties do not jump out to me whatsoever. They just offloaded Chauncey Gardner. I always fuck his name up. You guys know who I'm talking about. So I'm going to go with Xavier Watts from Notre Dame. Don't love that pick, but like I said, they're just so loaded on this team overall that I don't really think it fucking matters who they take here because they're just stacked. So that has been the Steel City Sports 2025 NFL mock draft. Like I said, in no way, shape, or form am I a draft expert or a college football expert. This was just kind of a fun way to talk about these teams, talk about the draft. Really excited to watch it tomorrow. Like I said, I will be putting out a video. I'm not going to review the whole draft tomorrow, but I will put out my reaction to the Steelers, who they take, because I'm really, really intrigued by that. And then probably over the weekend or so, I'm going to probably review the entire first round and probably give draft grades. So if you made it this far in the video, really appreciate you listening. Please like and subscribe.